Welcome to the call. I'm Jay Sapsford. Japan is a bellwether for the global response to Washington's tariffs. The US, noting Tokyo's trade surplus, is threatening 25% levies on Japanese autos and other imports. Prime Minister Ishiba has taken a hard negotiating stance, just as the Japanese public is headed to the polls this weekend. So doing, he has stoked discontent, not only with Washington, but with the all-important Japanese business community. Now keep in mind, Japan, like many U.S. trading partners, is a close ally. It's a big investor in the U.S., and it's hard to find anybody with deeper military ties to the U.S. So here's the question on my mind. Will U.S.-Japan security ties survive the tariff test? Joining us now is William Chou, Deputy Director, Japan Chair at the Hudson Institute. William, welcome to the call. It's great to have you.
Great to be here, Jay.
So let's start with the basics. Where do things stand and what's at stake here?
Sure. So I think from a trade standpoint, we're currently at a standstill. As you mentioned, Japan faces a 25% reciprocal tariff, as well as 25% or sectoral tariffs, Section 232 tariffs in key industries such as automobiles, semiconductors, steel, aluminum, those kind of things. And this is significant because Japan has a $68 billion trade surplus with the United States. Automobiles account for 40 billion of that, and automobiles are obviously a key part of the Japanese industrial sector. So the Japanese government has asked for zeroing out all of these tariffs, and has tried to appeal to the White House by offering carrots like greater economic security cooperation, increasing Japanese FDI, as you previously mentioned. However, things are deadlocked. I think this shows a fundamentally misreading by the by the Japanese government of the Trump administration. Because I think whereas the White House is eager for greater economic security cooperation, FDI, into the United States, it does not want to it is not a trade-off between tariffs, the trade balance, and non-tariff barriers. Further complicating the matter is, as you mentioned, the July 20th upper house election, which has limited the degree to which the Japanese government can negotiate or have flexibility on key issues like, for instance, agricultural imports, which, farmers are a key supporting demographic for the ruling party. So we're at a deadlock. Minister Akazawa representing the Japanese government, has come to the U.S. 7 times to negotiate with no real progress. The talking points of the last 3 or 4 times have been fairly stagnant, and I think they're kind of hitting the limits of their effectiveness. Plus, the Ishiba government has not exactly been acting with great alacrity on key Trump administration priorities such as Alaskan LNG, as well as other areas. And so ultimately, I think what's at stake is that the U.S.-Japan economic relationship, which is extremely important for both countries, as well as a growth trajectory of the Japanese economy and industrial base needed for further cooperation between the United States and Japan. And also, finally, they're also impacting trust between U.S. and Japan, especially within Japanese the populace, which are, I think, demonstrating greater skepticism of the United States in
Well,
recent months.
William, what else might Japan offer to the United States to get this deal across the finish line?
Well, I think a lot of this is really about reframing what Japan is doing, right? I think certainly, I think they need to address really priorities that the White House demands, which is, I think, partly building more FDI in the United States, so that, for instance, automobiles that are sold in the United States should be built in the United States, right? That certainly is a key priority for the Trump administration. I think other areas of where Japan can sort of help itself is to, frankly, to do better PR, right? I mean, Japan is the largest FDI investor in the United States. It's responsible for millions of jobs and cutting edge technology. Yet, a lot of this has been underreported, underpromoted. I mean, it's been very, frankly, I think they could have been doing a better job. The president recently supported the partnership between Nippon Steel and U.S. Steel, a $26 billion investment. These are all things, I'm sorry, $26 billion investment as well as technology transfer. And these are all things that the Japanese government and Japanese businesses should be really pointing to when emphasizing the benefits of the trade relationship and their willingness to work towards long-term balancing of the trade deficit but also demonstrating their active participation in the administration's economic goals.
Now, William, you mentioned the investment. Take a look at this chart. Japan has invested over 780 billion in the US, more than any other country, and most of it is in autos. And that has, as you mentioned, supported millions of American jobs. Now, here's what the Prime Minister said about this in a recent debate in Japan. Japan is the world's #1 investor in the US and creates the most jobs there of any country. So my question is this. The PM's in the middle of a fight. Clearly, he's using this as a PR leverage point domestically, and he's using the $3 trillion in cumulative Japanese investments in the U.S. To try to improve his chances in the election. But we see no sign that he's getting traction with either Washington or, if you believe the polls, with the voters themselves. And I'm just wondering why not?
Uh, I mean, certainly it's also very curious to me, right? But I think a lot of it goes back to essentially it's a PR challenge, and it's also the fact that Japan has been investing in the United States since the 1970s, right? So that's why they are leading the way in terms of total investments in the United States. They are supporting millions and millions of American jobs, and in terms of and also valuable transfers of skill sets in terms of developing workforce as well as technology, which is vital to our industrial future. That said, I think they have not been sort of been prioritizing or at least announcing of new investments, right? So so including the aforementioned $26 billion investments by Nippon Steel into U.S. Steel, as well as the $5.5 billion annual purchases by JERA, a Japanese energy firm at JERA in Louisiana LNG, as well as the $100 billion promised by SoftBank leader Masayoshi Son in American AI investments. I mean, these are all wonderful figures that they should be really promoting, right? This is, this is a great opportunity to demonstrate to the administration that the administration's policies, be it on tariffs as well as a pro foreign investment agenda in the United States, have delivered real results. But to be very fair, to be very frank, I have not seen much evidence that they have been really promoting these figures, both in terms of sort of in the sort of the government level as well as in the sort of the popular level. And I think this goes into sort of a larger challenge that Japan, culturally is just not a very they're certainly not they're not self-promoters, right? They're not natural self-promoters. And while I think that's very desirable from a interpersonal standpoint, I think in terms of public diplomacy and engaging with a administration that prioritizes strong relationships with allies, I think they need to do a better job here.
Yeah, certainly a more pronounced view of that or pronounced presentation of that might help with this administration. I wanted to take a moment here to pivot to the election that's coming up on Sunday for the upper house. You mentioned that earlier. I wonder how that's playing into the negotiation. There's a member who's asking, is there a tie between the election and the hardline stance of the Ishiba administration?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the Japanese election right now is it's primarily domestic concerns, but I think the both the balance of domestic as well as foreign issues are sort of creating a confluence that certain parties within the election are trying to exploit for their own gains, right? So I think right now what's really at play here in the Japanese election is pretty normal concerns over frustrations over cost of living and quality of life issues that are certainly not unique to Japan, right? Um, and I think a lot of that lies in sort of the Japanese government in the 2010s promoting tourism into Japan as a form of essentially, promoting Japanese exports. And the number of visitors in Japan grew from 7 million in 2009 to 37 million by 2024, right? This is a 400% increase without significant expansion of infrastructure to support it. And so ordinary Japanese people are really feeling it in everyday life, right? You go to Tokyo, you see the crowded trains, you see the pricey hotel rooms that prevent, internal domestic business travel, and also, tourists, certain tourists who are badly behaved, violating unsaid cultural norms. And it also doesn't account for the higher foreign purchasing power in Japan, where things are relatively cheap, and so foreign purchasing power is greater in Japan. And the Japanese government, to be fair, has not really acted with sufficient speed or alacrity to address these challenges. So, for instance, there is still the same 200 yen hotel night tax, the 1,000 yen departure tax, as well as no limits on foreign purchases of Japanese real estate by foreign buyers. And these are all areas of real friction with the Japanese populace. And so, building off of the current ruling party's unpopularity, rice prices, cost of living prices, the extreme populist parties, such as the Sanseito, has used dissatisfaction over these sort of quality of life issues, and to sort of portray it more as like deeper structural issues where Japan is too weak or too willing to kowtow to foreigners, be it immigrants who live in Japan or in terms of or internationally, where Japan is too willing to compromise or sort of give in. And so I think that's placing a lot of pressure on the current government.
I'd like to ask you how the security ties with the United States play into this. Now, since World War II, clearly the US-Japan relationship has been one of the most important bilateral security relationships in the world. The Japan hosts 15 US bases across Japan, from Misawa in the north down to Okinawa in the south, and Japan pays 70% of the cost of maintaining those bases, which is far more than Korea does for hosting US troops there, or Germany for that matter. I'm just wondering now, I saw a poll the other day that saw that 81% of the Japanese public has got some unease with the United States. Are we seeing a rethinking of the security relationship?
I think there are always people who sort of question to what extent they should be working with the United States. I mean, look, I think the question over security in Japan is has always been an issue that has been an evolution, right? So, for instance, before Prime Minister Ishiba was elected to office, he had proposed the idea of an Asian NATO, right? This is actually something that he brought up in an interview that we did with him here at Hudson. Certainly, I think other politicians have raised the idea of Japan joining NATO, right? I think that there certainly is a lot of debate on security issue, and in a sense, as someone who argued with his host father back in the 2010s over the Article 9 article in the Japanese Constitution that bans like a military force, I think this kind of debate is welcome. However, I do think that in Japan there is a lot of concern over essentially where the security relationship is going. I know that, for instance, Undersecretary of Defense Elbridge Colby had raised the proposal of Japan increasing its defense spending to 5%. However, I will point out that look, whereas the current White House is very much, I think all the key economic actors in the current White House are very aligned on the end goals of their economic policies. And I think in the U.S., because there's been so much devotion to the tariff as well as economic issues so far, I think the defense and security issues has actually been relatively under debated, under sort of worked out, right? So I think that's still a work in progress. And so I think certainly I understand when Japanese folks are alarmed at the proposal of increasing Japanese defense spending from I think right now it's 1.8%. It's going to hit 2% by 2027 to all the way to 5%. I think they're understandably concerned, but at the same time, I think defense and security policy is something that is still up for debate in the United States. You can see that because Secretary of State Rubio recently addressed this Japanese defense budget issue by de-emphasizing specific percentages and instead emphasizing the need for Japan to develop the necessary capabilities to contribute to security in partnership with the United States in the Indo-Pacific region. And I think ultimately capabilities and effectiveness rather than specific percentages are what we're looking for in terms of working with Japan, which is our most important partner.
Now, you mentioned that the United States is asking Japan to raise its defense spending. There seemed to be some the Japanese seem to be quite taken aback by this. There was a suspension of the 2+2, the foreign minister and defense minister meeting between Japan and the United States early this year. Seems rather unprecedented. It seems like the Japanese were really taken aback by that. One of our members is asking, in light of the challenges negotiating a trade deal with the U.S., would Japan consider strengthening connections with other countries that put the U.S. at a disadvantage? I wonder if you might address that both economically and in terms of the security relationship.
Sure. I think Japan is strengthening its relationship with other countries, but I don't think this is in place of the United States, right? So, for instance, ever since the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, Japan has been much more proactive on security measures, and that means in terms of both in terms of its own defense spending, passing its own economic security law. But also expanding its approaches towards foreign military sales and transfers of equipment, right? Uh, Japan has expanded its sales of radars as well as equipment and Coast Guard ships to the Philippines, right? Given the South China Sea is a major hotspot. And so I think, and Japan is also trying to join AUKUS Pillar 2, which really focuses on dual use defense technologies that could be useful in case of a crisis in the Western Pacific or the Southern Pacific. And so these are all things that Japan is doing, and I don't see them doing this as a way to replace the United States, right? I think all of our allies in the Pacific realize, be it Japan or South Korea or the Philippines or Australia, all realize that we have to work together to ensure a stable and free and open Indo-Pacific that is the source of our prosperity and security, and it cannot be done without the United States. What the United States is demanding or requesting or strongly requesting is that our allies have to step up, right? That they have to increase their capabilities, whether if it's specific percentages of their budget or to just bring more capabilities to the table and use them in a way that allows for greater interoperability so that we can respond more effectively if there ever is a crisis by a unfair actor in the area. And so
Okay,
I
I'd
think
like
that is the real emphasis.
Interesting. Okay, I'm going to pivot back to the trade negotiations here. We're getting a couple of questions. I'm going to ask both of them at the same time here, so bear with me. What is Japan saying about retaliation? Now, this was specifically in terms of pharmaceuticals, but I wonder if you might broaden that to also talk about retaliation, the possibility of retaliation on any front during these negotiations, should the worst come. And then another one was asking us, how do you assess the fact that Minister Akazawa was not unable to meet with Besant during his last travel to D.C.? Did you feel like that Besant could not open his schedule for the talk, or he felt Japan was not ready to the deal and he gave pressure by not meeting with Akazawa? So was this a pressure tactic, or is this just a matter of scheduling?
Well, I'll answer the last question first. I think it's a matter of schedule. I don't know if you've noticed, Liberation Day meant a lot of tariffs against a lot of different countries, and as look, I love Japan. I think Japan is very special, but the secretary has a lot of obligations, and I'm sure he had to undertake a lot of meetings. So I would not take that personally against Japan. I think it's just a matter of schedule, and certainly I think Secretary Lutnick and USTR Greer have important roles in the negotiation of any trade deal with Japan. So I don't take that personally. I think there's reports that Secretary Besant is currently in Osaka for the World Expo and also probably to eat some takoyaki balls. And he is reputed to possibly meet with Prime Minister Ishiba and also Minister Akazawa. So I don't think negotiations have broken down. I don't believe that he is unwilling to negotiate with Japan. I think it's purely a scheduling thing. On the other question on retaliation, I think, look, there's some serious, there certainly have been popular discussions in Japan about retaliation, right? So whether or not to sell American treasuries, right? Japan is the largest holder of American debt in the world. And also, Japan occupies key nodes in the larger supply chains of major American priority industries, right? The 232 tariffs are all on industries that the administration prioritizes. So, semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, automobiles, and Japan occupies major key nodes in those supply chains. And theoretically, Japan could leverage those key nodes. But at the same time, realistically, that would just create more havoc between the United States and Japan, both in terms of our economic relationship, but also as part of our larger security relationship, our diplomatic relationships. And I think there is, you know, cooler heads understand how important this relationship is and how creating a back and forth retaliatory framework is frankly not helpful for either country, but also ignores the ongoing major challenges that we face in the region from both a diplomatic, a security, as well as an economic standpoint. We all have bigger fish to fry. We all should be focused more on getting this trade deal done so that we can get back to work on working with each other effectively in terms of providing a secure and prosperous relationship for both countries.
Okay, William, my final question for you. A Japanese poll in May showed that roughly half of Japan wants to side with the US over China, but the other half thought Japan should treat the two equally. And this strikes me as relatively new.
Yeah.
Are we watching the beginning of a major realignment, or is this just the normal sort of rough and tumble of a relationship between two allies that in the end are very, very close?
Sure. I mean, look. We've been allies for what 75 years now. There are always going to be areas when there will be bumps along the road. That said, I think the Japanese public, which I think since the invasion of Ukraine has taken an increased interest in security matters, they understand who really is the bad actor in the region, right? Whatever disagreements they may have with the United States over trade, they still realize that at the end of the day, they are on the same. We are both on the same page in terms of what we value and how we want to sort of conduct business and diplomacy in the region. And I think, to be very, very frank, China is its own worst enemy. I think the Chinese diplomacy and economic actions under President Xi Jinping have been very harmful to China's attempt to sort of portray itself as a kindly actor. And I think as a result, frankly, I think as long as China continues to do that, I think we shouldn't take that for granted. But I think the United States and Japan relationship will persevere, and we need to continue to push ourselves to find ways to support it and strengthen it and heighten it. But at the same time, I do know that China is probably willing to trying to create wedges between the two countries. But at the same time, it is also doing things because of its own political economic priorities that undermine its case. And so we have to be aware of it. We have to, work against it. But at the same time, know the priority is the U.S.-Japan relationship.
All right, that's definitely something we'll be tracking closely in the weeks ahead. For now, William Chou, Deputy Director of the Japan Chair at Hudson Institute, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Our audience has gotten their shot of informational espresso, and it's ready to tackle the day. Missed a live episode? Catch the replay on our website, LinkedIn, or on YouTube. You can also listen to the call's podcast edition on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you to our members for joining us. This has been The Call, brought to you by the Global Intelligence Desk, asking the right questions to navigate uncertain times.